I'm Jennifer Johnson, Public Art Program Manager with Arts Huntsville. In this video today, I'm going to be walking you through the proposal writing process for public art. Now, there's a few different circumstances in which you could be responding to an RFP, or a request for proposals. You may be responding to an artist-initiated program, or you may have been invited either individually or among a select group of artists to submit a proposal for a particular project. Alternately, you may have previously responded to an RFQ, a request for qualifications, which we also call an open call. And in that process, if you were selected as a semifinalist by the selection committee, you've been given an RFP and be expected to write a proposal as the second part of that process. Either way, we know this can be really intimidating the first time you do it. That's why we put together a resource to help you out. You can find our Artist Proposal Writing Workbook at our website at artshuntsville.org or at a link in the video description below. This resource is to help you organize your thoughts and get all the things you need together that you need to include in your proposal to make sure it's thorough and complete and addresses the majority of the questions that the selection committee is likely to have. So stay with me in this video and I'm going to walk you through that document page by page and help maximize your chances of having a successful proposal that's selected.
So here we have our proposal writing workbook. It opens up with some preliminary information to familiarize yourself with public art and the public art program in Huntsville. References our public art master plan. If you haven't already viewed the public art master plan, it's also available on our website, and I encourage you to have a look at that. It goes over the vision, the goals, and the restrictions of the public art master plan for Huntsville. If you speak to that in your proposal, it's always going to be helpful. So here we have a section going over your responsibilities as a public artist. This is worth keeping in mind, especially if this is your first public art proposal, and helpful for you to evaluate whether bringing your art into the public arena is something you want to do. Doing so does come with some responsibilities that are unique. You're going to be expected to communicate effectively and transparently about all the work you create. You're going to have to be open about your artistic process, especially in your proposal. You're going to have to go over all your fabrication techniques, everything that you do, to your site partners, to the commissioning agency, to any of the selection panel, even the general public when you're doing educational programs that might be part of your contractual obligations. You're going to have to be open about your process. So if you have a secret private practice and you don't want anybody to know your process, public art may not be the arena for you to pursue. You're also going to be engaging in an iterative process. This is something you may have also seen with private client. You're going to be open to suggestions. You're going to have to make revisions sometimes in order to address the needs of the site, address the needs of the public art master plan, and other needs that may come up. Again, this is something that is also present in private practice, so that may not be entirely new to you if you're a professional artist. You're also going to be responsible for adhering to agreed upon timeline. So, there may be some things that happen that make alterations to the timeline unavoidable, but this isn't just between you and a private client. This is between you and a number of other stakeholders, and adhering to that timeline is very important. So one of the things we're looking for when we check your references and when we're evaluating your timeline that you submit in your proposal is going to be feeling out the confidence level that you can adhere to that timeline. And finally, you're going to manage all funds for a project. Now that's common in private practice too. With public art, you may be working with a bigger budget and have additional obligations associated with larger scales and making your work appropriate for the site. So your budget, we'll go over that later, is going to have to be very detailed and addressing all of those concerns. So we have some more information here that goes about the different types of public art commissions. When you have a request for qualifications, you are not going to yet need to worry about this proposal writing process. We're just evaluating your qualifications as an artist for consideration, and usually from those rounds, semifinalists are selected, and those semifinalists are asked to submit a proposal at that point. So for an RFQ, you don't need to do this process. Unless you're selected as a semifinalist, then you should be prepared to go through this proposal writing process. Our request for proposals can be from the onset, as it is with our artist-initiated program, or if you are perhaps a direct selection. That's the point at which you're going to have an RFP to start. If you're starting with an RFQ, again, when you are selected as a semifinalist, you'll get an RFP at that point. So now we're going to get into how to prepare a proposal. So what we've done here is we've provided you with this resource. This is just a workbook for you to kind of organize your thoughts. When you're finally putting together a proposal, you're going to be putting together something more polished. It's not just going to be like filling out these forms and turning them in. This is just a planning tool. So typically you will present your work in a PDF format. If you're doing a proposal presentation in person, which is often the case, you may do your project in PowerPoint or something similar to that. Videos are also options sometimes. Usually your entire proposal is going to involve a number of documents. Often, if we're doing submissions on SlideRoom, we'll request a PDF, and then you'll get some options for supplemental materials. If you have great big architectural drawings that don't fit well into a PDF, you can scan those, upload those. Sometimes a video or even audio material may be appropriate, depending on what helps you best communicate clearly and effectively. And here we move on to the worksheets, which are really the tool you're going to use to get all that information together for your proposal. So this first worksheet is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to share basic information about your artwork, as you can see outlined here. Additionally, you're going to have some more narrative in this section of your proposal, and we've put some starter questions that you might want to consider when you're putting your basic narrative in. I'm going to add to this that when you're answering a specific call, you're going to want to read that RFP very thoroughly. It will speak to specific goals and themes that the selection committee is looking for. If you're doing an artist-initiated proposal, or if for some reason the RFP doesn't offer you a lot of specific direction, I really advise that you go reference our Public Art Master Plan that generally goes over everything related to the goals and needs of public art, and really address that in your narrative. That's something I don't always see artists do. They'll talk a lot about their capabilities and their experience, and we can see that in your resume and the other documents we have about you as an artist. What you really want to address in your narrative is how the specific work of art that you're proposing addresses the desired goals, themes, and purposes. Here there's a section about site information. A lot of times when you receive an RFP, there's already going to be a site selected. You've responded to an RFQ and you've been assigned an RFP and you're specifically assigned a site. If that's the case, you don't need to worry about that, but you do want to include in your narrative how the proposed work is relevant to the site. If you're selecting your site, as with an artist-initiated proposal, you're going to want basic information like a contact, address. Usually that'll be in the application itself in the RFQ process, but you'll want to include additional information if for this particular RFP you are selecting your site. So here we have our visual materials worksheet. This is to help you sketch out some drawings that will help you organize your thoughts in terms of what you want to include to visually represent your proposal. These are just for brainstorming, planning purposes. Your complete proposal is going to have a lot of visual documentation. This is visual art. So we've provided this to you to just keep you thinking that you need to do some concept drawings or renderings if you're using a CAD software or something like that, showing any kind of three-dimensional artwork from multiple angles. For a 2D piece, the art itself will be most of your visuals. If you can, Photoshop it onto your proposed site and kind of give the selection committee a view of what it might look like in context. That is helpful as well. This is your public art worksheet, useful for planning, but for your final budget, I would recommend putting it in a spreadsheet like Google Sheets or Excel so that you have everything calculating out where you can modify the numbers as needed if it'll be useful in the future during the whole process. We've given you a list here of items to consider when putting together your budget, so I'm going to go over it. If this is your first time doing a proposal, there may be some items here you hadn't considered. Generally, your artist award is going to be inclusive of all expenses. That's the safest place to start. In certain RFPs, you may see that there's indicated items such as lighting or site prep that may be covered by the commissioning body, but that isn't always the case. So be sure to check your RFP very thoroughly to see what the artist award is inclusive of. Generally, you want to consider your artist compensation. Make sure you are fairly compensated for your design and labor, including communication, meetings, anything in the sample contract. That's all time you should be compensated for as well. Be sure to include that. Materials, of course, including supplemental materials, site prep expenses, insurance. That's one thing that if you don't already have general liability insurance as part of your studio that meets the requirements, you'll need to acquire insurance to cover you during the process of fabricating and installing the artwork. If you require assistance with that, do reach out to us. We plan on putting out some insurance resources for artists out in the future. For now, if you have questions about that, please reach out to me. Include in your budget support materials such as lighting, if not covered by the client, any transportation expenses to and from the site for day-to-day installation, any transport associated with bringing the artwork to the site, compensation for subcontractors, including if somebody's providing you with your engineering documents, if you have any designers helping you out with how to make it practical, if you are working with third-party fabricators, which is an item further down, any of the people that you may be compensated, make sure you search your brain thoroughly for anybody that you're going to need to help you and get quotes and put those in your budget. I would even recommend keeping those quotes ready and available, if not in the proposal itself, for the Public Art Committee or the Selection Committee to review if they have further questions about those subcontractor expenses. Any fabrication or installation equipment, if you're going to need to rent power tools or anything like that. Your per diem expenses, if applicable, your parking fees, lodging if necessary. This resource is designed for local artists, so that lodging situation is unlikely to come up, but it's something to keep in mind if you're writing a proposal for a call that's out of state, out of town. Don't neglect your lodging expenses. So finally, let's talk about your contingency. The general recommendation is 10 to 20% of your budget held for unanticipated costs. Materials increases, delays that require you to invest more of your time and labor, anything like that. That 10 to 20% is just a guideline. You can do less, you can even do more, but make sure you're justifying in your narrative why your contingency is around where it is, especially if it's much less than 10% or if it's over 20%. What do you do with that contingency if you don't need it? A lot of times people will use it to enhance their artwork. For example, if it didn't originally have in the design a lighting element, perhaps you can add a lighting element with your contingency if you don't end up needing it for the artwork. So this is not a comprehensive list, but it can help get you started. Another thing that's not necessarily required in your budget, but is good to keep in mind, is anticipated maintenance cost. Usually when you complete a public art project, you're going to be contractually obligated to provide maintenance documentation. If you can anticipate what the maintenance costs are going to be ahead of time in your proposal, that's information that the Public Art Committee or the Selection Committee will consider, and that can help them evaluate your project and also can help plan for maintenance needs. So this worksheet is about your timeline. Every RFP you have is going to have a different timeline, and it will be pretty broad. Here is where you include a more detailed timeline, because sometimes the timeline you're given in the RFP is pretty narrow, and you're going to need to check mark off where your various design and installation tasks are going to come in on that narrow timeline. Other times you may have a year window, let's say, to complete your project, and you're going to communicate here. It may be a 3-month fabrication and a 1-week installation. You're going to indicate on the calendar when you plan on having all that work completed at the various steps. After all that, you're going to take your notes. You're going to assemble all of your information into a polished document or multiple documents. You're going to take, your budget spreadsheet. You're going to have high quality, drawings that are probably several pages in some cases. You're going to have your narrative, and you're going to put that together in a single document. Usually we'll ask for your main proposal in a PDF document that's either uploaded to our application portal or emailed. That gives our staff some time to review your proposal and anticipate any problems with it. If those problems are significant, we'll bring them to your attention and give you a chance to correct for that before we pass that on to the selection committee. You may want to make an alternate version that's more suitable for in-person presentation. That could be a PowerPoint presentation or similar. That could be a video. Anything that you think is helpful to communicate something in an in-person environment. So be thinking of that. And whatever time allocation you are given for an in-person presentation, we advise leaving 5 to 10 minutes for questions from the jurors. So I hope that was helpful. Please feel free to reach out to us at publicart@artshuntsville.org if you have any questions. If you'd like to submit your narrative or any part of your proposal, please do that. I know this is an intimidating process for a lot of artists, especially who have not done this for the first time. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or if you want feedback. We will have resources in the future to help you put together proposals for public art. So be sure to look at our website at Public Art Resources and our YouTube channel to keep an eye out for all those resources. And as I said earlier, please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. We're here to help. We're here to make this as painless and as easy as possible. Good luck, and I hope to see some of your art beautifying our city.